Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, after the tragic death of Tyree Nichols in Memphis, County Executive Mark Elrich and the County Council struggle for solutions so something similar won't happen here. The feds may not ban gas stoves, but while you weren't looking, Montgomery County already has. And a parents' right group in Baltimore County is seeking to ban 2 LGBTQ books from Baltimore County Public Schools. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former House of Delegate member Maricé Morales, Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee Mark Uncapher, and calling in on phone is our special guest, Jim Shalleck. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. On January 7th, 29-year-old Tyree Nichols was stopped in his hometown of Memphis, Tennessee for a traffic-related incident, which tragically led to his death, allegedly at the hands of 5 Memphis police officers. The shocking video of the incident was released last week and it tore at the soul of the nation. Yesterday, Montgomery County Police Chief Marcus Jones called the officers' actions indefensible, and County Executive Mark Elrich and the County Council issued a joint statement that reads as follows. Our nation once again mourns the brutal loss of a young Black man's life at the hands of law enforcement and must now cope with the collective trauma that this tragedy has triggered. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Your wealth of experience as a prosecutor in New York and here in Maryland and as a federal prosecutor is needed for this discussion. As an attorney, I realize that the police officers involved in the Tyree Nichols case are entitled to a defense. But what has been seen so far on the video has been very disturbing. Comment, if you will, on the policing aspects of this situation.
Well, traffic stops and other issues with the police can be the most dangerous situation an officer gets into. Traffic stops and domestic violence calls are the most sensitive and risky for an officer. The videotape here, I can't use any other words other than disgusting and despicable. The man was brutally beaten. The issue for the prosecutor is to show the intent of the officers, but more importantly, there's 5 defendants, each charged with murder, and each officer had a different level of participation in the murder. So the hardest thing to do is to individually present evidence to show that they too are guilty of the murder. Like in other cases, you see some officers holding someone down, others standing guard and watch, others keeping a crowd at bay. So you have to bring in the evidence on each one individually, not collectively. I mean, collectively it's disgusting, but you can't convict someone collectively. You got to show that they individually committed murder. And I think that'd be the hardest thing to do in a case where there's so much chaos and police activity.
Even if a suspect was resisting arrest, what could lead to the violent reaction that we saw in these videos? I mean, we understand that Mr. Nichols escaped police custody when they were first trying to apprehend him. Whether or not they were using excessive force at that time really is pale in comparison to when they captured him the second time and then so savagely beat him. What could have led to that?
You're absolutely correct. Well, I mean, if the perpetrator, or now deceased, had a weapon, that certainly would justify to some extent an accelerated level of police enforcement. If there's a weapon, if someone is high to the extent of being, out of control, reaching for guns, the actions, each case stands separately. The action of the deceased certainly warrants the level of force that they use. Here, the video, to me, and it's just my opinion, these officers are presumed innocent, they exceeded the force necessary, at least from the videotape. Now, certainly they'll have an opportunity to present evidence as to why they did what they did. But in the absence of a weapon or having friends helping you, the deceased friends, trying to help him escape. I didn't see that either.
All right.
But the officers will have a defense.
Let me go on to, I got to go on to Maricé, Jim. Thank you for those observations. Sure. Since interactions with the police often occur during traffic stops, Maricé, there are those, including the county executive and several members of the county council, advocating re-imaging policing, which would eliminate most traffic enforcement by police. But the public seems to want, additional police activity. What's the conflict? How do we solve this conflict?
I couldn't agree more with the statements given by the police chief. These actions were indefensible, I would say savage, traffic enforcement. I'm all about automating, but at the same time, we have to look at the training aspect of a police officer's. I have heard this time and time again that the most dangerous part of a police officer's job are traffic stops. I don't know that that's really the case. And then we qualify it by domestic violence. Okay, that's a whole other set of data. But I don't know about you, but these traffic stops, especially in our area in the DMV, it's really unlikely for people to be running around with guns in their hands, especially when it comes to a traffic stop. I have visited the police training facility over in Rockville. I spoke to the officers there and the training instructors about de-escalation. When it comes to traffic stops, they approach it as if they were going into war with a civilian. So I think we have to really commit to a culture shift within policing, not just with the audit. So of course, I'm all about the traffic automation, but also as a criminal defense attorney. And we understand that in the traffic code, we have jailable traffic offenses, like driving under the influence, like driving without insurance, like driving without a suspended license. That's really also attached to child support and other enforcement issues. But beyond that, it's really about changing the culture and the humans that are really taking on these responsibilities as law enforcement officers. Because at the end of the day, it is discretionary. But when it comes to the state laws that we have and the training that we have for officers, we have to really think about a cultural shift. How realistic is it that the most dangerous part of an officer's job is when you're enforcing somebody that's speeding or somebody that has a taillight issue? I would like to look at the data on that. We know that in Montgomery County, 110,000 traffic stops happen annually. I think we have some data. We need to keep looking so that we can update our training tools around that.
Thank you, Maricé. But there's certainly national data that would indicate that enforcement through traffic enforcement and traffic stops reduces violent crime. And Mark, there's a wealth of data and wealth of examples of that. But over the past few years, our county leaders have positions of cutting the police department, cutting traffic stops, and they seem to have different priorities than the community has, which, as we saw when they met 3 weeks ago in White Oak, we're asking for additional police resources.
Well, but let me start with sort of the premise of the LREC and those council members' idea. I think there's a minimum expectation. It's really disrespectful to the Montgomery County Police Department. I think we can expect that they can conduct traffic stops when appropriate without engaging in anything. To even use the Memphis as a standard, but without engaging in inappropriate behavior. We should expect that. We should expect that they can do law enforcement. We understand that law enforcement can be dangerous and that it can involve very trying situations, but we can also expect that the police will be able to perform the way they're supposed to be. And I think it's inappropriate for our leaders, our county leaders, to sort of challenge to say, well, we can't trust Montgomery County Police to do traffic stops, therefore we're going to go back and automate it. I think that's really the wrong answer.
Well, when I was a young attorney, I served as a prosecutor, and there were jump out squads that would, jump out in high crime neighborhoods to try to reduce the level of drug dealing, the level of violence. And those activities are very valid issues, but of course they can lead to overreach. Jim, you recently ran for Attorney General, and Maricé has, asked a question about how bad is the crime here in Montgomery County. What was your experience as you were on the campaign trail?
I thought that was the number one issue around the state. One carjacking, one murder is devastating to a family, an individual. So I look at the crime as an individual problem. People are scared. They don't go out at night in large measure anymore. But to me, Casey, this sends a terrible message to the county council. They just got elected. Most of them are brand new, and they're sending a message that they're soft on crime. That's no good. And secondly, why, if you're going to cut back on traffic stops, would you tell the whole world? You don't tell people we're going to cut back on enforcement. Traffic stops stop drunk drivers. The cop uses a computer when you're stopped. They pick up people who are wanted on warrants in other states. They find guns. They find drugs on legitimate searches. It's a very effective and important tool for the police. Wow. And to cut back on it is the wrong signal. And who are these county council people? None of them have law enforcement experience. Who are they to tell the police how to keep us safe in our houses when we're sleeping with our children?
Well, we've elected
Who are
them, Jim. We've elected them. And Maricé, I want to pivot to Maricé because Maricé, when we were on the show 3 weeks ago, we were discussing the level of policing and the fact that we're having a hard time hiring police officers. Is it just a matter of hiring and training, and how do we get there to make this job, something to keep us safe?
So let me just clarify. There's a distinction between the traffic stops that I was talking about, routine traffic stops, a tail light. If that is the sole purpose for a stop, we don't need to be using a law enforcement. We're dealing with suspects and warrants out of state, et cetera. That's a whole different story. I'm talking about routine speed.
We're having a hard time hearing you, Maricé. So, Mark, I'm going to just give you the last 30 seconds on this. What is the solution here? I mean, this is a terrible thing that we just saw, the terrible thing we witnessed, but we have to strike a proper balance. You got 30 seconds.
Well, I think it's important for us to have as good qualified police, and also we talked about training, but it's also appropriate for there to be management of the police force. And I think we have every right to expect that police are going to use the right appropriate measures. We don't have to micromanage them in a way that is inappropriate when they are using what are time-tested, sound police methods. And I think that's the appropriate standard for us to use here in Montgomery County.
Thank you. And Maricé, I'm sorry that I had to interrupt you. You were fading in and out a little bit at the very end. Jim, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for joining us today. You provided valuable insight for us. And now when we come back from this short break, there is a group of concerned parents who wants to remove 2 books from the Baltimore public school system. Stay tuned. And welcome back. For a while, it seemed that the social strife that erupted in Virginia and other surrounding states during the pandemic about what was actually being taught in our public schools sort of skipped over the state of Maryland. During the last gubernatorial election, Republican candidate Dan Cox's efforts to gain political leverage using this as a topic seemed to be mostly unsuccessful. But now a parents' right group in Baltimore County has picked up this issue and wants to ban 2 books from the Baltimore public school system. Mark, I'm old enough to remember that when D.H., I'm not quite that old, but D.H. Lawrence published Lady Chatterley's Lover in 1928, the issue about what was appropriate reading for the public, in particular in schools, has raged as a topic of concern. Even up to the 60s, that book was being debated. Now there's this group in Baltimore County seeking to ban Genderqueer and Lawn Boy as 2 books that they have argued should be illegal because it is akin to distributing obscene material to minors. How do we address this?
Well, first, let me just correct the record that you weren't around in 1928 when the book was published.
Almost,
but sometimes it feels that way. This is, I guess, a classic example of a conflict of values between what parents have as, and where the school system is a balance of interest and trade-offs. And it's inevitable to take place when we have a school system that is largely designed sort of one size fits all. I think the more appropriate solution is to allow for more educational choice that can accommodate the diversity of interests, because I also appreciate the fact there are going to be other parents who are going to say, yeah, this is something that ought to be a part of the curriculum. In our society, we really need to acknowledge the fact that there are a diversity of views on the way kids should be educated.
But there's also a strong push right now. We're seeing them, I think, there's a frustration as, test scores keep coming back where, reading and mathematics learning levels are not being achieved. And there's a pushback saying, the schools need to refocus on what their educational targets should be. So Maricé, how should it be determined? Should the schools be allowed to decide what's being taught, the professionals, or should parents have a more active role in determining what is being taught in public schools?
Well, in the state of Maryland, we have the precedent that, the state legislature does not tell educators what the curriculum should be. The professionals do that. They're, the actual teachers and the educators actually do that. The State Department of Education does that. I don't think that we need to change that. And to answer the question in terms of, should the parents have a say? I think there is some input, but when it comes to, public funds going to public schools, we have to create a curriculum that is inclusive, that does shape, the leaders of tomorrow to understand a world with folks of all backgrounds, all, sexual orientations, et cetera. So I think that when it comes to reading and mathematics, we have a blueprint. We have a lot to look forward to. The governor is on board. And the state of Maryland, we are very proud to have finally passed a social justice with some racial equity, social equity in racial justice lens that's going to make sure that all students in the state of Maryland will be college or some kind of post-secondary program ready by the 10th grade.
Well, that's a remarkable, goal if it can be achieved. Mark, I'll give you the last word on this.
There's so many jurisdictions in the state of Maryland where we're well short of that particular objective. It would be great for us to finally be able to reach it.
Well said. We got to keep pushing this. This is an issue that's going to continue to grow, as I think, as a political issue. And although it has not really taken hold here in Montgomery County yet, I'm sure that there are those who are going to keep advocating for this topic. So, but as we go on, this is the one that really gets the juices flowing for people. It certainly has nationally. Last week, the Twitter sphere was all agog when the Consumer Product Safety Council announced that it wished to ban gas stoves, which are in 40% of all American households. Quickly they were shocked. Federal regulators were shocked by the outcry, and the public did a hasty retreat. And even the media was accusing Republicans of playing identity politics with gas stoves while insisting that nobody wants to ban gas stoves, and gas stoves are dangerous and should be banned. Of course, when you pull back the curtain on the other side of the stage, the Energy Department, where I used to work, has a proposal they published Wednesday that sets the first of their kind limits on energy consumption for stoves, drawing fear from the industry that the regulations could effectively end the use of the products altogether. So, Maricé, are there just too many cooks in the kitchen? Why can't we just use our gas stoves?
That was something that actually caught my attention because I had no idea that in Montgomery County, apparently, that we're on that bandwagon of prohibiting gas stoves. I own a property with a gas stove in there now, so I really don't know, when is this going to roll out? How are we going to enforce this, et cetera? But I definitely think that we need to get the message out and educate our residents, because it was a surprise to me as well.
Well, what's wrong with them? That's what I don't understand. Every cook will tell you that they love it because they can modulate the heat. they can cook better. And Mark, as Maricé, alluded to, the county has already, under Mark Elrich's leadership, banned the future use of gas stoves by use of the building code, not health and safety.
So this is a great example. I mean, if we're going to have a conversation, and again, if this is climate change driven, and we haven't been quite clear about that, but there is certainly a subtext to that, since I'm not sure about the health and safety data that is also being referenced. Then we ought to have that forthright conversation rather than about this is why we're making the change, and is this a change that makes sense, and what are the trade-offs? But unfortunately, what we do is we get these basically administrative proceedings where they're really essentially hidden from the public, and the public has very little input, and you kind of have know-it-allism, if you will, take hold and try and enforce changes that people really aren't prepared for or really aren't on board with. And then we back off. So, in another couple of months, we'll probably be talking about, are we going to be able to have gas-powered automobiles sold in Maryland anymore? And again, that's not something that's going to be altogether popular. And it's also something where there's not a case that's really been made that that's necessary.
Well, as you know, Mark, Maryland is one of the states that is joined with California,
right,
and, on environmental issues. And so when California banned the use of gas-powered automobiles, I think it's in 2040, then Maryland is, unless the governor and the General Assembly goes a different direction, that's the same road we're going down.
Absolutely.
The road to perdition. I'll tell you, it's just, going to hell in a handbasket. All right, stay tuned for Parting Shots. Welcome back. Now with Parting Shots, Mark Uncapher.
Thank you, Casey. We talked about this earlier, this idea of stopping traffic stops in Montgomery County. 7 years ago in the county, we started an initiative called Vision Zero. And the idea was to reduce the number of fatalities from traffic. Unfortunately, we really haven't made very much progress, judging from the numbers. And what's really concerning is that one of the important tools that we have to keep people from being killed in traffic is being able to stop drivers who are doing things that are inappropriately, reckless driving, and what have you. This is an example where the consequences of public policy need to be balanced with competing interests.
Thank you, Mark. Maricé Morales, your parting shot.
Always on a light note, just wanted to congratulate some of the new members of the legislature with all of the with Westmore's new appointments. We have seen a new delegate representing District 14, now Delegate Maricé North. So very, very proud of her. She's a close friend, and also wanted to congratulate Delegate Janelle Wilkins on her new leadership position as a vice chair now on the Ways and Means Committee. So just great to see a lot of women of color and Black women, young Black women in the legislature doing so well.
Thank you, Maricé, and I want to thank you, Mark, and we appreciate our friend Jim Shalleck joining us today. Jim has been a longtime contributor for 21 This Week when he's not holding official office here in the state of Maryland. I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 This Week, I'm Casey Aiken.